MYFORD University Podcast, Episode 35. Question: will your business thrive or get crushed? Today we're going to talk about how to use Porter's 5 forces like a strategist. Welcome back, colleagues, to MYFORD University and the podcast. I'm George Sloan, founder and dean. Here we try to turn practical business thinking into real-world results. No filler, no wasted time, just the frameworks, the skills, the mindset you need to move fast, learn hard, and win. Today's episode is about something that every business owner, strategist, and operator should know, but many ignore. Porter's 5 forces. Okay, as you probably, maybe you have heard of it, maybe you haven't. Maybe you saw it in a textbook and once thought, hey, that looks academic, but let me tell you, it isn't just a framework. It's a filter for smart decision making. Many MBAs would have learned this or should have learned this, and it has many applications and can be used in many deliverable work products, especially if you're doing a strategic plan. Okay? So if you're about to launch something, enter a new market, or figure out why your business is struggling, this tool in particular can change the game for you. So let's break it down the MYFORD University way. Practical, direct, and immediately usable. So what is Porter's 5 forces, or what are Porter's 5 forces? This model was developed by Harvard University's Michael Porter back in 1979, and despite its age, it's still one of the sharpest tools in the business strategy toolbox. Porter's 5 forces look at 5 competitive pressures that shape every industry and influence whether you can earn real profit or just survive. So here are the 5 forces. Ready? Industry rivalry. How intense is the competition? Whenever you're doing any kind of strategic deliverable, you should do a competitive analysis, competitive intelligence. So you want to look at the industry rivalry. Again, is it a highly competitive situation, or are you dealing with situations where there aren't as many competitors and you kind of have a first strike advantage? 2, you want to look at the threat of new entrants. How easy is it for others to jump in? This gets into barriers to entry, and I'm going to be doing an article about barriers to entry as it relates to the higher education industrial complex, if you will. Again, I've said before, college is a complete waste of time unless you're going for STEM, maybe law, medicine. What you really are, or even education. What you're really encountering there are barriers to entry, and I'm going to go into that pretty deep. But that's threat of new entrants. Okay. The other thing you want to look at, number 3, is the threat of substitutes. Are there other ways to solve the same problem? I can almost guarantee you there are. Unless you're coming up with something completely new, and then you need to scramble as fast as you can before other people figure it out and start doing it as well. So there are substitutes, and the question is your substitute faster, better, cheaper, or does it provide a value proposition that is better for your end users than the substitutes? Number 4, buyer power. How much leverage do customers have? Well, this kind of gets into supply and demand. If you are the only game in town, buyers are kind of forced to come to you. They don't have a lot of power. But if there's multiple possibilities, multiple competitors, you are going to be in a situation where the buyers have more power. And number 5, that's the flip side, supplier power. The other thing you want to ask is, can suppliers push you around? You have to be concerned about that. Plus, again, if you're the only game in town, you tend to have a lot more power and sway. So together, these forces tell you the following. They can answer for you, is this market worth entering? Can you defend your position? Are your margins at risk? This is how you stop guessing and start thinking like a strategist. We always want to think like a strategist. Okay, why the 5 forces matter. Here's why this model is essential, okay? Most people focus on their product. Few people look at the structure of the market they're entering. I mentioned before you should be doing a competitive intelligence or competitive analysis. You should also look at the market in general and the industry and possible substitutes that might not fall directly into your industry. So you can have an amazing product, you can have a great marketing strategy, you can have a smart, hardworking team, and still fail because the industry dynamics are stacked against you. With Porter's five forces, it helps you to avoid unwinnable games. Quite frankly, I believe that from time to time you should be changing the game so that you have an advantage. Remember, competitive advantage. So it also tells you what you're about to walk into, especially if you're going new and not dealing with an existing product. You're going to walk into a low margin price war. Well, then you're going to have to do a lot of volume on that low margin, and you're going to have to keep your costs in check. Are you going into a red ocean crowded with copycats? There's a great book called The Blue Ocean Strategy. The blue ocean is what you want. A red ocean, there's a lot of competitors and everyone's biting each other. That's why the ocean is red. I'll probably do a full article on that one too. A market that is dominated by customers who will never pay full price. I am a firm believer in culling your customer base. You need to do an analysis where you rank them A, B, C. You want your best customers who provide the highest margins to be your main customers. They're usually the 20% if you use Pareto or 80-20 rule. And then, the B's are the ones where you're still making some money, and the C's are the ones that are the lowest margin. In some cases, you might even be operating at cost, and quite frankly, you should try to move away from them. Another thing you want to look at is the supply chain trap with no leverage. This is where you need to think in terms of possibly doing vertical integration if your supply chain is one that is kind of volatile and you want to control it. I will do a full article on that at some point as well, horizontal versus vertical integration. Again, this isn't about optimism. This is about reality-based thinking. So let's look at the five forces in action. So we're going to break down each force, and I'll give you practical questions and examples so that you can apply it immediately, which is our motto around here. Learn it fast, apply it faster. Learning something is meaningless if you don't apply it, because applying it is what makes it stick, and then it also gives you confidence, and it also gives you a result. So always think about applying immediately. All right, let's get to it. Number one, industry rival, or industry rivalry, made up of a series of rivals, obviously. This one is pretty straightforward. How fierce is competition? That's really what it is. So you want to ask, are there lots of players? Is the product or service commoditized? Meaning it kind of doesn't matter which one you use, or do you have something special or different about yours? Because then you're in a league by yourself. All right, another question is there price pressure or discounting? You don't want to have a race to the bottom. Quite frankly, you want to be in a situation where I've talked about Daniel Priestley. He has a good book called Oversubscribed. And what you want to do is have limited or values that get you oversubscribed, like a restaurant where you have to make reservations. You want to make sure that you're not like any Joe on the street. You want to be different. And the way to do that is setting yourself up slightly as a premium. So here's an example. Airlines, brutal. As you know, tons of competitors, little differentiation, price wars each and every day. If you're in a high rivalry space, you better be lean, innovative, and highly differentiated, or you shouldn't enter at all. Don't even enter it. And quite frankly, you're going to be in a pissing match all the time. So you really got to think about how to do it differently. You want to set the new bar is really the way to get around that. Okay, 2, threats of new entrants. Here's the question. How easy is it for others to start competing with you? If you're in a business that doesn't have high barriers to entry and heavy capital and materials investments, you're probably in a business where it's very easy for people to enter. So you want to ask yourself, are there big upfront costs? Like I said, if It's a capital intensive situation. You need factories and equipment. Then you've got some barriers in place. But if they could start doing it tomorrow without having to spend too much time and effort, you got a problem. Here's another one you want to ask. Are there patents, regulations, brand loyalty, or technical barriers? They can either help you or hurt you, depending on which side you're on. Here's an example. If you're starting a coaching business, very low barrier to entry. Anyone with a website and a Stripe account can do it. Launching a pharmaceutical company, massive barriers on multiple levels. So the easier it is to enter, the faster competition shows up, and the harder it is to maintain your edge. Okay, number 3, threats of substitutes. Listen, substitutes aren't necessarily direct competitors. There are other ways your customer can solve the same problem. Ask yourself these questions. Can they replace my product with something else? Is there a substitute that is cheaper, easier, faster? Let me give you an example. A gym membership competes with home fitness apps. Coffee shops compete with Keurigs and instant coffee. If a customer can easily walk away and still get what they need, your pricing power drops, and it drops fast. So you want to create a little more value, and you want to create a little more experience maybe. You want to find ways to make it a little more premium. All right, let's talk about number 4, bargaining power of buyers. This is about leverage. Do your customers need you, or do you need them? One of the things I've always learned and advocated is never get too dependent on one particular customer, because then they kind of have power over you and you're dependent on them. Always want to diversify out. Even having, 3 customers, 4 customers, it might, if they control 80% of your revenues and your profitability, that's a problem. So you want to make sure you spread things out. Here are some of the questions to ask. Are the buyers concentrated? Can they switch easily? Do they pit vendors against each other? Well, I'll be honest with you. As a project manager, when I have to send something out to bid, I usually like to get 3 competitive bids. So in a way, I'm pitting them against each other. But what I'm trying to do is make sure that there's bid leveling, and I have to go through a process because I have to justify who I pick for the client that's getting the work done. All right, so let me give you another example. I'll give you a personal one there. If you sell through Amazon, customers have tons of power. They can compare 20 products in about 10 seconds. Even Amazon is going to compete with you there because they create their own products once they see what's popular. If you sell directly and have brand loyalty, you're in a much stronger position. The goal is to reduce buyers' power through value, loyalty, and uniqueness. I would say that Apple iPhones kind of do this. So think about that. Number 5, bargaining power of suppliers. Now flip it. Can your suppliers squeeze you? Ask, are there only a few suppliers? Is switching hard or expensive? And do they control something critical? A lot of people like to put in proprietary software, for example, so that making the switch to another competitor is very, very difficult. It's hard to take things, across platforms. Let me give you another example. A food brand is using rare organic ingredients that might have a few options, very few options. If the supplier raises the prices, you're stuck. It is what it is. Your job is to build redundancy, create options, and own more of the supply chain when possible. Again, that's getting into vertical integration there. But I think COVID disrupted the supply chain and taught people a lot of lessons. And you really need to have backups and redundancies, because if you don't, you're at their mercy. And again, you can do the same thing, in terms of, putting them out to bid if there's more competitors there. And you have a little more power over the customers if there aren't as many choices to go to, right? All right, let's apply it to a real business. So let's say you're thinking of launching a premium energy drink brand, highly competitive. I did quite a few studies on that a number of years ago, not for myself, but for others. Let's run it through the 5 forces. Number one, rivalry, very high. Tons and tons of competition. Some micro brands and some major brands. Coke, Pepsi, they're all in it. Then you get the micro brands, and usually what happens is the micro brands end up being bought up by the big ones once they, prove themselves. Two, new entrants, medium. It's not impossible to launch, but it's not easy to launch. Number three, substitutes, very high. Coffee, supplements, water, all sorts of other choices. Number four, buyer power, high because retailers and consumers are picky. There's only so much shelf space available, and people are very picky with what they choose, and retailers will only stock what's going to be popular. Number five, supplier power, medium, because organic ingredients are a niche. They're a little difficult to get. Conclusion, it's a tough market. If you don't have a killer differentiator, a unique story, superior ingredients, or a built-in audience, you will struggle. You're not doomed, but you better come armed, and you better be ready to really knock it out of the park. All right, what you should do right now. Here's your MYFORD University action step, if you will. Take whatever market you're in or thinking about entering and score each force. High is bad, low is good. Medium, watch it. Low is favorable. Okay? Ask, where do I have leverage? So rate that. Ask, where am I exposed? Rate that. Can I shift any of the forces in my favor? Rate that too. Remember, you don't need a perfect score across all five. You just need to know what you're dealing with and adjust accordingly. All right, here's some final thoughts. Business isn't going to be about just being good. Business is about being strategic. You can be good and not strategic, and in the end, you're going to lose. Porter's Five Forces is sort of, you can think of it as a competitive x-ray. Again, when you're doing a business plan, a marketing plan, you're doing a strategic plan, you're going to be using this because it should be in those type of reports. Again, we talk a lot about deliverables. It shows your landscape, it shows the players and the pressure points before you make your move. At MYFORD University, we believe in thinking before acting and acting with speed and precision once the thinking is done. Don't get caught with analysis paralysis. We've talked about that. Got to take action. And here's the thing. Once again, always iterate. Always get the feedback loop going because this is not a one and done. You got to do this on a regular basis. So use the framework, revisit it on a regular basis, teach it to your team, and if the market looks unwinnable, maybe it's time to walk away or find a better one. I think what you really want to do if you in a difficult situation is think about how you can really make a difference. Okay? So smart strategy is knowing when to play and when not to play, or when to change the rules of the game. So that's what I was just getting at. If you can figure out a way to do that, you can do it. All right. That's it for today's episode of the MYFORD University podcast. If you want to learn more about Porter's Five Forces and other strategic tools, models, framework, concepts, visit myforduniversity.com, where you can learn it fast and apply it faster. If you found this helpful, please share it with someone who's trying to make a smarter business move this year. Don't keep us a secret. Until next time, think hard, move fast, and don't just compete. Strategize. We'll see you the next time. Thank you.